Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us this afternoon for the Farm of the Future webinar. So this is part of the Royal Agricultural Society's series of Farm of the Future webinars, which focus on a different agricultural topic each month. This month I'm very excited that we're diving into diversification into insect farming, so it should be a really exciting one for us. And we're lucky to have a few different speakers with us today. So we've got Mike Boulton from Ento U.P, Thomas Farrugia from Bugs, and Larry Kotch from Flybox. And we're lucky to be joined by Nick Rousseau, who is from the UK Edible Insect Association, and he's going to be chairing today's webinar. So I will hand over straight to you, Nick.
Thank you. Can you all see my screen? Hopefully that's working. Okay, so welcome to this webinar. My name's Nick Rousseau. I run something called the UK Edible Insect Association. Have done for about 10 years, which you quite possibly haven't heard of. But I'll open this discussion with a few kind of scene-setting remarks about why insect farming is something you should be considering. And then I'll hand over to our experts who can tell you in more detail. And I should say that we're going to have about 30 minutes of us talking to you, and then an equally lengthy period of you having a chance to come back with any questions, comments, feedback. So feel free to use the chat function to type in any questions or comments that occur to you as you're listening. And then as moderator, I'll pick up on those and fire them at whoever feels best placed to answer as we get into the discussion session. So hopefully everyone gets their questions answered. Who's UKIA? Let's start with that. So we are an organisation that is set up to promote the idea that insect farming and farmed insect protein could be a good part of our food system. So we encourage and support organisations working in this area and connect them to one another, and hopefully also encourage the government to take it seriously. But we think farmed insect protein has a great potential, and our members are very diverse. Why? So what we're going to cover today is a bit about the why, a bit about sort of things you might want to think about as you consider your way forward into insect farming, get some practical tips on how to proceed, and learn a bit about what support's available that could help to make it viable. So why would you do this? Well, as we all know, the population globally is expanding at a great rate, and this means demand for animal products is also growing at a substantial rate. And this is putting a lot of pressure on the environment, on the global context. And so there's a need for options and alternatives, and they need to complement what we already have in the agricultural system. And our argument is that insects, crickets in this case, offer some really good options because they are very energy and very resource efficient, particularly water and land, and they also emit much less methane than other forms of protein. And so they could be a good way of adding to the options that people can have going forward. We've also been understanding the market position and seeing a growing interest in this area. There's a lot of media interest in insect protein, both as a human food and as a livestock feed and pet food. And so here are a few statistics to show that actually there are a lot of people out there who would be willing to eat insects if they have the right products put in front of them. And a lot of research has gone into looking into the potential as farmed insect protein as a livestock feed and as a pet food. I won't spend a lot of time on these, but these slides will be available subsequently. The sector in the UK has grown substantially in the last 10 years. I don't put that all down to myself, but it's exciting to see. And we're now seeing well over 35 companies developing products and technologies relating to farmed insect protein. There's a lot of innovation in this space, both in terms of the products that can be made from insect protein and the support available to farmers and the ways of making farming more automated, less manual. A few practical questions then that you might be asking, kind of what insect should I farm? Well, typically there are three main options: crickets, mealworms, and black soldier fly. and 3 main markets: human consumption, pet food, and livestock or agri-food. And as the diagram shows rather crudely, each has potential in multiple markets, and each of them, if you farm them, result in a good amount of what is a very effective fertilizer product, or frass. So a key early decision is kind of which insect you're going for. And today we're going to hear from Ento U.P, who are specialists in mealworm farming, and from Thomas and Larry, who specialize in black soldier fly. Another key decision that you need to make is the kind of scale that you're considering. Is it a kind of kitchen top unit? Is it more of a sort of local on-farm arrangement where you're converting your own organic material into protein for use on the farm? Or is it that you want to scale up and address a wider market opportunity? And there are solutions for each of these levels. The regulations need a little bit of understanding. I'm not going to go into them in detail now. But there are 2 main aspects when you're looking at feeding insects to animals, not humans. The first is the classification of the animals that you're currently legally able to feed to. And so this shows that if you're in the position of farming fur animals, you can feed them just about anything. But poultry is much more restrictive. Fish and pet food, I would say, is a good option at the moment, and the specific insects that you can feed to both of those. The other challenge that we face, although we see it as an opportunity at the same time, is that insects can be fed on a huge variety of different substrates. They are amazing converters of anything organic into protein. So they're kind of bioconverters in nature. And so the issue is, what can we feed them that's available to us? Unfortunately, the regulations around farming insects are very restrictive because insects are classified as livestock and treated in the same way as other forms of livestock. So this table very quickly just summarizes some of the restrictions, but what's possible. And there is a guide, a technical document that's been produced, you've got the link to it there, which goes into a lot more detail into the regulations. But just to give you a sense of, there are things that you can feed the insects, but there's quite a lot that we're currently lobbying and carrying out research to show that they should be fed to. On the human food side, there are a number of insects now that can be put into the human food market, thanks to work that we've done at UKIA with our members to submit what were called novel food dossiers to show that they are safe and that they have no issue in the market. So that is currently the position, that we've got those 4 insects that can be legally sold in the UK. The last thing I want to talk about is how UKIA is building an insect farming community of practice, where we have a growing number of insect farmers within our membership, and they are being supported by specialist technology providers, the academic community, but also through connections into the supply chain of retailers, manufacturers and product developers. And we're going to be going forward using that community to really help to develop guidance, professionalize the sector, and hopefully lobby for government improvement as well. So a little bit of a plug for UKIA, but I'm going to hand over now to my esteemed colleagues who are mainly UKIA members, I'm pleased to say. The first of whom is Mike from Ento U.P. I'm not seeing any chats coming up, so I'm going to remind you, if you do have any questions or things that are bugging you, feel free to put a question in the chat and we'll develop an answer as we go on. But Mike, are you ready to take over?
Yes, I am. Let me just share my screen. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm a bit coffee deficient at the moment, so you have to bear with me. I still think it's morning. Right. Okay. Ento U.P. We are coming up to 3 years old. We are mealworm farmers. We farm mealworms organically and produce not only live mealworms for particular markets, but also organically bred mealworms for human consumption. We also are marketing the frass as a wonderful fertilizer as well. The mealworm is basically a baby beetle. So the beetle lays the eggs turn into larvae. Those are the mealworms. So we harvest those larvae when effectively just prior to pupation. If we let them carry on, they will turn back into beetles and continue to produce an ongoing supply of beetles, eggs, mealworms. Basically, you can keep about 5% of your product, and that will keep your colony at the same sort of size. So mummy and daddy beetles lay their eggs. Eggs hatch about a week to 10 days later. The mealworms grow over about 10 to 12 weeks up to harvest. Mealworms actually discard their exoskeleton many times as they grow. The exoskeleton is high in chitin, and we're looking at harvesting those exoskeletons and using that chitin in various different products as well. We then, as I said, keep 5 to 10% of our pupa, turn them back into beetles, and away we go. Now, why mealworms? Emma Strong, who's I'm afraid not able to be with us today, and I decided upon mealworms because they didn't have wings. They're really easy to contain, and there's no mess, and they provide a really good complete protein fit for the animal, the pet food, and the human market. A freeze-dried yellow mealworm, I'm not going to read everything, but it's very high in protein. We produce some human consumption snacks that are 43% protein and contain 20 amino acids, 9 of the main ones. So, mealworms are wonderful things. We farm on a local organic farm. All of the power that we use is generated by solar. We use various sensors to maintain the humidity and the temperature in our units. We're currently growing in 40-foot decommissioned refrigerated containers, and we are developing smaller units that will give more options with regards to diversification. It doesn't have to be contained within the containers. People want to put in units, and that's absolutely fine. We're talking to various different organizations where we might be able to use it for a little bit of waste management, flower factories, things like that. Flower as in roses and things, not flour as in wheat. We grow organically, and we have recently last year won the Sustainability Award from Worcestershire, Enterprise in Worcestershire, which was fabulous. We have very, very, very low emissions. We're working to reduce them still further. Very little waste. We've actually reduced our waste over the last year as well. We want to have a sustainable product. We source our feed, grow both grain and the wet feed locally. It's organically sourced. The Ento grow is say OF&G registered as organic. The whole thing with what we're trying to build here is sustainable protein, a sustainable business with very, very little waste. Fertilizer could be used locally, the protein could be used locally, or it could be processed in a major unit for onward use. Blocks and routes to market. We've had many conversations about human consumption over the summer. I did quite a lot of different festivals. There is a I don't like using the word yuck factor. I think it's more of an ingrained inhibition towards eating insects. I actually don't think they're yucky at all. As Nick touched on, there's certainly a lack of awareness and consistency with regards to rules and regs. The FSA and the allergen analysis. It would be great if all of that was simplified, had a similar approach that perhaps the FSA in Australia and New Zealand got, but that will come, I think, over time. We sell a lot of our live mealworms via retail and e-commerce. We cover the wild bird sector, we cover domestic poultry, exotic reptiles, and small number of fish, and in fact one chap who grows ants. So I think the exotic reptile market is going to be one that grows. We are going to be growing a little bit further. We've got plans. We're working with the Manufacturing Technology Centre on, say, a modular farming unit with some high-spec comms and high-spec sensors, so we can harvest things correctly at the right time, depending upon the market for those particular products. We helped with the dossier, enabling the mealworms to be consumed by humans in the UK, and we are working with various universities, Lincoln and Northumbria, and we have been talked to some of the agricultural colleges, Hartbury, for instance. We've got to involve research. We've got to push forward to make sure that the differences between the insects, the markets that they are best suited for, it is most appropriate. There needs to be lots and lots of work. There's some really interesting stuff come out of Portugal on lettuce and the benefits of black soldier fly and mealworm frass there. Something certainly we could do with pushing forward. Thank you very much. Any questions, please just pop them in the chat. I shall pass you back to Nick to introduce your next speakers.
Thanks, Mike. Spot on there. A very good summary and overview. I can already think of my own questions, but I'll leave others to come in. We now have Larry and Thomas. They are two different, well, running two different companies, but they kind of coexist rather nicely together. And I believe the next 20 minutes is going to be a bit of a double act between them. I'm not sure who's going to go first.
Yeah,
but, would you like to?
I'll probably just put slides up, Nick, and then Larry will nudge along according to how we need to.
Okay.
But thank you for introducing. Right. Let's see if that's working. I'm assuming people can see the full slides rather than any shared slides. Bro, thank you, Nick. Right. Thomas Farrugia, CEO at BetaBugs, along with Larry, who will introduce himself as well. Well, BetaBugs is an insect genetics company. We develop and distribute breeds of black soldier fly to insect farmers. So we'll supply you with the livestock to go into insect farming units. And Larry, you want to introduce Flybox?
Hey guys, I'm Larry. Yeah, I think if you click to the next slide, I think there's a little intro of you. And,
yeah, great. Okay, I've done that
yeah.
one. We're up in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
I will supply a
And
Flybox.
So I'm with Flybox. We're an insect farming technology company. So we focus on building insect waste management solutions or insect bioconversion solutions for existing waste management companies and food processing companies. So basically people who either generate or handle a lot of organic waste. We give them an alternative to other organic waste treatment solutions. And we build the technology and then provide a plug and play support business model so that you can outsource the hard parts of insect farming, which there are a few, which is why me and Thomas kind of got together, was to kind of separate out some of the difficult parts and offer a joined up solution to people wanting to get into the space. And so, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we'll be running through effectively how black soldier fly works, farming works, especially when you go for a joined up solution. And this kind of starts setting the scene a bit. Larry, do you want to walk through this?
Yeah, so this is kind of the overview. So we're going to unpack each of these elements. So forgive us if it seems a bit, like an abstract painting or something right now. But essentially, we're going to be walking through how you can take disused space. So if you're in the kind of farming world, this is kind of marginal warehouse land, old warehouses, and you can then put in a turnkey insect farm or insect bioconversion unit. You can then work with a breeding outsourcing company. You can work with BetaBugs to provide you the baby larvae, the grubs, which arrive, and so that you're able to then outsource all of the entomology. You then put your organic feedstock, whether it's generated yourself, if you have organic feedstock that works, or from a partner that we can also supply you organic feedstock from as a pre-mix or as something you mix on site. Then you operate it. So there's a kind of SOPs in terms of how you
I'm
prepare
also
the crates full of insects. Yeah. Sorry?
Sorry, Larry. I think I've had a bit of a signal break. You go first.
Okay, no worries. And then there's at the end of the process, there's a buyback. So where the adult larvae, so the grubs that have grown into adult larvae, that's the product we want to kind of sell to the market. We then have various kind of offtake options for you, which are ready-made that you can either choose to plug into or not. And so the point of this kind of model is to decomplicate and also make more affordable the insect farming journey and make it much easier and lower the barrier to entry for the existing food industry to jump in. So our philosophy is not to set up an insect farming industry that's kind of separate. Our model is very much to provide insect solutions to the food industry. Then it's not the insect industry advocating for change, it's the food industry trying to industrialize the use of decomposers for a natural waste management solution. And so that's very much our philosophy going in, and that's why what we'll show you is kind of in that spirit.
Right. So I'll just walk through a bit about the black soldier fly, and then we'll go a bit more into the kit. But what you've got with black soldier fly is effectively two very distinct animals in one. You've got a fly which exists to lay eggs, and then those eggs hatch out into neonates, which you can kind of see crawling around actually across their bigger siblings. We supply either eggs or juvenile larvae, and then the idea is that your juvenile larvae, either the eggs or juvenile larvae, you'll grow out into mature larvae, which are what you turn into the protein source. And pre-pupae and pupae are effectively just going to turn back into flies and lay eggs. So that's the bit we worry about. And we focus on making the eggs and the juvenile larvae. Juvenile larvae into larvae is 7 days, so it works really effectively to be using juvenile larvae in a, say, modular farming system, because you don't need to worry about hatching eggs. You don't need to worry about producing eggs yourself as well. But you just take these grubs, whack them in, and then off you go. I'll touch on that in a bit. But yeah, the black soldier fly is very hungry, fast growing, as you've seen from that picture. It's a bit like a rabbit turning into an elephant. It's a big increase in biomass. They eat a wide range of things. High protein source, so 40–50% once you dry them down. And it's a low carbon alternative because of what you're growing them on, because you can produce locally. And they're a low risk animal to farm in terms of it's legalized in the UK and there's no association with any disease. Then the other drivers are you can turn waste into value. Arguably, if you feed stuff to black soldier fly, especially if it's not actually considered waste, so there's a winning there if you're in the food waste processing sector, or if you're just looking to provide a sustainability story, because it's now if you're putting it to the animals, it's not waste from the food waste hierarchy. It allows you to produce protein with a low carbon footprint. If you're using it on farm, it allows you a method to diversify, or you can use it for on-farm feeding. And that's where effectively there's cases for improving well-being and animal welfare through those approaches. And lastly, you've got the frass, which is great for improving plant health if you apply it to field or sell it into horticulture. So I'll just touch in on grubs or juvenile larvae supply from ourselves. So this is the key bit you need for livestock farming. This is what will go into the farm, and effectively it simplifies your rearing process. It allows you to dedicate all your production footprint and labor to producing rather than worrying about hatching eggs and producing eggs. Your cycle time is pretty much halved, which allows you to double turnaround, and that increases the amount of revenue you can be generating from say a Flybox grow. And because you're getting live grubs, you don't need to worry about hatchability and hatch rates as well, which can fluctuate your production. So the way it works really is pretty straightforward. We will hatch eggs out at our egg production facility. We'll feed the larvae to give them a great start as babies, and then we'll clean, package, and ship them over to the customer, to yourselves or to others. And then it's all about receiving these and then putting them into the feed stock you have. When it comes to feed, black soldier fly can eat a wide range of things. So you can grow them on anything from fruit and veg to well, pre-consumer vegetables to brewers' grains to other feedstocks, as long as it's pre-consumer vegetable in nature in the UK. And then you grow these guys out for a week on those feedstocks. The yield of larvae you get will be dependent on the feedstock. And then you harvest those larvae out, and then you receive another batch of grubs or juveniles, and you put them back in and eat it again. So the idea is if you've got a number of modular units, so grows, you can actually have one on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which you just run independently, and you're producing 3 times a week. So this is just what I've run through, so we'll pretty much skip that. And then, Larry, are you covering feedstock?
Yeah, unless you want to.
Yeah.
I'm happy if you
No,
want
go
to
ahead.
jump in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So on the organic feedstock side, this is what you're feeding your insects. And now Nick went through some of the permissible feedstocks. We will kind of cover those a bit in the next slide in a second, but there are obviously restrictions, first of all, on what you can do depending on where you are in the world. So if everyone's planning on the UK here, we are restricted to the kind of pre-consumer feedstock like dairy grains, bakery waste, vegetable waste, food factory waste that doesn't contain animal byproducts, can even include retail depackaged food that doesn't have any ABP animal byproducts in it. And so what you want with feedstock is to get it down to a porridge consistency. So the insects will eat any waste. So one of the kind of cool parts of insect farming is you think, okay, you could have a bin and you could have insects eat everything in the bin. And yes, that's technically true, but it will take them a long time to do it because they have very small mouth sizes. So really the particle size, if you put some black soldier fly in a dustbin, they will eventually, if you have enough of them in there, get through everything, but it will just take them an awfully long time. And so from an economics point of view, the energy you take to process it down into a porridge just speeds up that cycle time really quickly. So when Thomas was talking about a 7-day cycle time, that's contingent upon having waste within 1 to 3 millimeter particle size, more or less. And that's when they can eat really, really efficiently. You also have to take into account the feedstock itself needs to have as high protein as possible, ideally. It's not the end of the world. They don't need huge amounts of protein, but in general, the higher the better. They have nutritional requirements like any animal. So in the same way that if anyone is here in the poultry side, in the same way that you would have animal nutritionists figure out the diet for the least cost analysis for a poultry diet, the same thing happens in insects. There's protein, carbs, and fats and fiber and that you want to hit. The only difference with insects is that rather than just eating that feed, therefore just focusing on the nutrition, insects live inside their feed as well. So the environment of the feed is also important. So its viscosity, its density, how easy it is to move back and forth. So, you can actually nerd out quite a lot when it comes to feedstock. So depending on what you have access to, you're going to want it to be able to be processed as cheaply as possible. So acquire the waste for as cheaply as possible, get it processed as cheaply as possible, and meet the nutritional and environmental requirements of the insects. And then all this kind of economic stuff and logistical stuff. So is it from a consistent source? You certainly don't want to have waste that is going to fluctuate. So one day the factory you're working with has 20% more water than the other day because they decided to flush the machines out a different way or whatever. So you can get very, very particular, and even waste sources that are the same on paper can be extremely different from 2 different suppliers. And so they're not always hot swappable. And so that consistency and that reliability is going to impact what your insect product looks like at the end. And so if you're trying to sell to a customer that has exact requirements, then of course it's not going to work if your feedstock suppliers are all over the place. So there's many things to consider, but that's the broad stripes on feedstock, and you can work with people that help you with that. You can work with nutritionists. You can do a waste map, formulate diets from that waste map. There's a process you go through, like with feeding any animal, and combining ingredients. But yeah, I think I can said enough about that. So here's the list. I think we'll be forwarding these slides on to those that want it. But so I think we've already covered that. So we can go to the next one. So yeah, and in terms of the farming system, so we've covered the grubs now and the feedstock. So both of those now need to eat in a nice environment. And this is a tropical animal to BSF, so they require, broadly speaking, 27 to 30 degrees temperature, and they need 70%, 60 to 80% humidity, depending on what part of the life cycle. So you're talking about fairly high humidity and fairly high temperature. The good news is that when you're vertically farming them inside growing tunnels, they give off a lot of heat. So if you've got your airflow system designed properly, you're actually very low energy expenditure. So one of those units that you see in the picture, the yellow ones, are the growing tunnels. You don't have to do it inside containers. The reason why we show some of our images in containers is because most people do not want to deal with planning permission for their first sites. They might have marginal land. They might not have space in their containers. Sorry, in buildings, their buildings may not be insulated. And so, but you can build in insulated rooms. So as long as you've got a roof over it, you can save on the container part, even though that's a small part of the price, you can save it. What you do get with containers is a certain fungibility and tradability. So if you have designs to move to a larger site later, you can stack more containers, you can change them, you can trade them, you can resell them. It becomes a kind of a sort of actual tradable asset rather than something that you're bespoke building, and then the future will require you to change things. In terms of the feedstock kit, so that's the growing tunnel. So we have software that will manage whatever rain or shine or conditions there are outside. Everything will be controlled inside. And it's not just about the temperature and then in humidity. This is not like poultry or pig. Sorry, if you could go back one. It's not like poultry or pigs because this is controlled environment agriculture. It's vertical farming. There's a lot of obstructions that the trays cause that impede the proper distribution of air throughout the top and the bottom. So many farming companies will have problems with what we call hotspots. So different parts of the container or room they're working with will have different conditions. This can lead to escapees. It can lead to inefficiencies of all sorts. And so we've gone quite far, and our kind of IP relates to how we get the air to flow and distribute that nice environment as power efficiently as possible, kind of thoroughly. So that's kind of the growing side. The feedstock kitchen side, the red containers, the bit on the left, that's where you're preparing the feedstock. So let's say you have fruit and veg coming in, brewers grains, they might need to be mixed up. So the fruits may need to be shredded and ground. You might have dry waste that needs to have water addition. They need to be mixed, and then they need to be pumped into trays. And so there are various devices to do that. And you can tailor that feedstock kitchen depending on the feedstock you have. You can have a very versatile setup that allows you to deal with a lot of things, or you can have a lower cost, very fixed thing that's working on a feedstock that you have control over, and you just want to deal with that feedstock. So there's definitely more customization at this end of the spectrum, along with weight storage and all the rest of it. And then at the end of the process, you're typically at a very minimum sieving the larvae from the frass once they finish consuming the feedstock. So you've got to sieve them, you've got to blanch or clean or kind of make hygienic the larvae. And then you can either go to a freezing or a drying. And then our off-takers, which we'll get to in a second, we'll get to off-takers in a second, but there's a kind of post-processing that you can choose to do on site, or just kind of let the batches build up and sell it to somebody else who can do the post-processing on their site. So yeah, that's probably everything I've got to say there. Yeah, and that's basically I'll just say a quick piece here on automation. You can go various levels of automation. The thing you see in front of you right now is like a 5 ton a day system. That's 5 tons a day of feedstock, which is going to produce about 1 ton a day of live larvae. And so that, that sort of thing, might run £500,000 if you wanted to do that, or, just shy of that, like 400K sort of thing. And that's a kind of viable pilot where if you want to start getting into some sort of semi or pretty decent automation, to pay back the kind of automation capex, you're going to need to be growing at least at this rate. Sub this, the kind of more pilot scale, you can get away, especially if you're just learning the ropes, get away with less automation, much more manual ways of preparing the feedstock, just bearing in mind that the economics are not going to be there. It's going to be a break-even scenario to kind of cut one's teeth into it. As you scale up, though, you're going to want to have picked the equipment in the beginning that is possible to be automated later. So you do want to think about your whole journey before and plan that all, because you will embrace automation at some point if you're going to go down this route. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've touched on this as well. So scaling.
Yeah, I think we've touched on this. Yeah, exactly.
And then we're kind of just mindful of time, so just looking at what the operations look like.
Yeah, it's just about, it's on average one person per 2.5 tons per day of feedstock. So that one at the bottom there that I was showing you earlier, that's about two people to manage that. It's mainly, you know, looking after machines and supervising. It's not quite a perfect thing in that the bigger you go, there's more economies of scale. So actually the FTE per ton of feedstock goes down over time. And obviously at the smaller end, you might have you know, it might take two people just to run 2 boxes, which would be the same as 5. So it's just bearing all that in mind. But it basically, the day-to-day is you basically have the feed mixer, which is pulling all of the ingredients in and mixing them up. It's then dosing them into 10 or 20 kilo trays. Then obviously in comes the grubs, which are also dosed in you kind of tip in the amount of grubs per tray, which is kind of already defined, and the dosing that you're doing is already defined. Then you're basically stacking those on a pallet, shoving those into the growing room. And then at the end of the process, you've got to take them out, separate the frass from the larvae, and then decide on how you're going to process both of those. And then there's basically a washing station, and then it comes back to repeat. So that's the kind of the process. That happens once a week, that whole thing. You know, it can happen over a 1 or a 2 day period every week.
And on the product side, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, this is kind of an area of continuing movement. So you have to, it depends on where you are, depends on your quality of product, which depends on your feedstock, which depends, there's many ifs in all of this stuff. I'm trying to just give you a kind of pointers, but in terms of the main markets, dog and pet food is soaking up the majority of black soldier fly. Like, you know, most insects produced on the market are black soldier fly, and they're going to kind of pet food, and for dogs mainly. There's kind of specialty fishing baits that are also good, reptiles, exotic pets, wild bird food, backyard chickens, you know, so the kind of whole dried larvae, defatted meal, oils, purees are very popular with pet food, so the live purees. So there's different things, and roughly speaking, that price over there, 700 to 1200, is what you would get for kind of live. So if you're drying it down to 30% of the live weight, then you times everything by 3. And so that's kind of the range of prices you would expect to get per ton of live larvae coming out. So if you're making a ton a day, that's the kind of revenue you can expect per one. You know, there you know, TBD, many things, but that's the kind of range. And then on the frass side of things, it can go as low as like 50 pounds a ton as just agricultural spreading. But really, if you're going to PAS 100 dry it, so you're going to actually 70 degrees for an hour, then it can go into fertilizer products and be sold at garden centers and horticulture. And that's where all of the guys doing biochar and doing like peat-free are very, very excited about it. Lots of trials going on in the UK, lots of companies selling frass already, lots of companies combining frass with things. And there you're able to get bigger numbers.
Are we nearly there?
Yeah, I think I'm just mindful of,
Oh.
We've touched on sustainability, so I think we're good, Nick, in terms of, this was previously what we were touching on, where the idea is if you're using the bugs, you're effectively putting them in a reuse, recycle category, or kind of animal consumption actually. So the idea is it gives you a stronger sustainability story. And then just putting it all together, the whole process really is, if you're working with ourselves and Flybox and bringing online a modular farm, you effectively bring on a simpler, more efficient system. You have more stable production, and you can solely focus on production, which makes everything much easier. And the other benefits to working with ourselves is effectively you've got dedicated local suppliers in the UK. You can come visit, you can come understand how the kit works and how to farm the grubs. You're going to have a rapid turnaround in bringing the kit online, and then get supply with you from the start, and we'll go with you all the way. And as you scale up, because we're invested in your success and simplifying that operation. And we are quite good at what we do, so we are experts, and we want to bring you online as quickly as possible. And that's pretty much a wrap from our end.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so we're getting some questions in, which is just what I was hoping. One question is about the regulations, and then 2 questions. One is about the competition for other forms of other uses of feedstock, and also just about the kind of your company's strategies and why you've gone down that route. So we start with Freddie's question. Can we please dive a little more into what the current regulation is for the 3 types of bug mentioned, what is stopping the use of these insects or protein in animal and human foods or with FRAS, e.g. what's changing and when are these changes likely to come in? So I can respond most confidently about the novel food situation for human consumption. I would say the regulations differ by the market rather than by the insect, broadly speaking. So the novel food position is that insects are all considered to be novel food, and therefore the government requires us to prove that they are safe, despite the fact they've been eaten for centuries all over the world. So we have submitted through the UK membership 4 insect dossiers. And that means that because there was a transitional arrangement that we again agreed through Parliament, these insects can be sold in the market right now. And that is pretty much without very much restriction, because it's a blanket arrangement that Parliament just agreed based on the names of the insect species. What will happen, however, is that the novel food dossiers that we have submitted, once they are approved by the FSA in whatever time frame, that will then define the scope of what is approved, and that will include what the product looks like, what the product is used in, the kind of food products that it goes into, and the processes. So that will then give a more tightly defined definition of what's legally allowed to be traded in the market. So we have established novel food clubs for companies interested in the different insects, so that they can all kind of work together to make this viable and to take forward a good regulatory basis. And we are lobbying for this to be for these restrictions to be reduced, because they are extremely challenging for the sector. I don't know if Larry or Thomas want to, or indeed Mike, want to talk about the regulations around livestock feed, pet food, and FRAS, or do you want me to make an attempt?
Happy to talk about mealworms specifically, and Larry can hit the Flybot, the black soldier fly. So we are marketing roasted mealworms for human consumption. There is a little bit of a hoop to jump through with regards to potential allergy, i.e. crustaceans, because of the chitin. But we are marketing those currently. There are also foods for cricket on the market in the UK, and I can see that this is going to be a growth market. I've done festivals through the summer, got people to try them, etc., etc., and there is a growing acceptance that A, it's another option, and B, that they're actually quite protein rich and good for you. The FRAS is a different one. There's lots and lots of research going on as to the benefits of the different types of FRAS. I alluded to earlier a report from Portugal about the use of mealworm FRAS and black soldier fly FRAS in the production of lettuce, and it was actually found that the mealworm FRAS actually performed better than the current fertilizer, which I believe is potassium nitrate that they use in Portugal. One of the things that we don't know, however, is what those mealworms were fed on. Larry certainly mentioned that your outputs, your product, your protein can vary upon what you actually, what you feed them varies your output. So we're doing various testing on various different inputs to see how that changes the outputs and where they're best used, and amount of chitin in the FRAS and things like that.
But I think the question was specifically about the regulations. There's no restriction on the sale of FRAS?
There's no restriction on the FRAS as far as mealworms are concerned. There are no restrictions on the mealworms from human consumption. The restrictions on animal feed is that we can feed them live, but we can't feed them dead. They're not animals until they're dead, at which point they're animal byproducts. As soon as they're animal byproducts, we can't feed to animals.
Okay, I'll let Larry step in now, because he is very knowledgeable about.
I think, to be honest, I think instead of sorry for kicking it around too much, but I actually think Thomas is more the the expert on that stuff. Yeah, we're all deferring to each other, but yeah, I think
on feedstock with black soldier fly, let's getting back to the question then. So What's stopping the use of insects, proteins, in animal and human food? Well, we're not. Let's focus on the feed. With black soldier fly for feed, similar situation as mealworm. You can use it live for poultry and pig. If you want to feed it processed, so you've turned it into a meal, you can use it in fish and pet. And in terms of feeding, in terms of what you can feed them, it's pre-consumer vegetable food waste, or food products. Waste is the moment you've kind of binned it. This is actually quite a bit more tricky in terms of if you're considering a waste. You typically want to just collect it and then just feed it to the bugs. What's holding this all up is effectively a lot of Brexit regulation, or post-Brexit situation, I would say. The reality is that Europe's gone ahead and approved insects for use in pig and poultry meal, and that was just a Brexit hang-up where if we had been in the EU for maybe another 3 months, I wouldn't be telling you this. So that's one which is being looked at by effectively an industry group called the Insect Bioconversion Association, and getting that into DEFRA. And on the feedstocks, there has been work done by the Feed Standards Agency, well, commissioned by the Food Standards Agency, and that's looking at, can we grow, say, mealworms and black soldier fly on meats and other things which are currently not permitted. The results seem to indicate it is not high risk, so there is a case for the FSA looking at this and then taking to Parliament the case for broadening the feedstocks beyond pre-consumer vegetable. And that kind of nearly takes us into Wouter's questions about feedstock as well in the context of biogas and biofuels, which I'm happy to answer there as well. We can touch on FRAS again, but Wouter, just answering that one, effectively, it's really interesting in the UK industry seeing the waste handlers and the waste managing companies, which Larry will be able to shed some insight on as well, diversifying into the space on the basis that they want to have another offering to anaerobic digestion. And the reason for that is the moment you feed something into anaerobic digestion, it is considered waste. The moment you feed it to bugs, it's not waste, so you're reducing your waste footprint if you're thinking about ESG and sustainability metrics. But at the same time, when it comes to biogas and biofuels, you're producing effectively what's a commodity. Whilst with bugs, you're producing a high value ingredient which can then go back into the agri-food supply chain. So there's both kind of an ESG aspect to it, but also a sustainability, a commercials aspect to it.
Yeah,
Right.
I'd add on. I'd just add on a little bit to that point, saying that exactly like Thomas is saying, when we're working with waste management companies, they see it as they're constantly being asked by their customers, who are the food companies they're sourcing this material from. We're saying we want to do more in circularity. We want to make sure that the waste that we're producing is going back into the food system. And so insects in nature are, nature's upcyclers. They do that with dead and decaying matter. And so it's seen as a kind of natural way of doing that. And they get very excited about it. But so that's on that side. And then in terms of the feedstocks themselves, in the UK specifically, there's all of the there's friends we have in biogas, some of which actually were in biogas that have now swapped. There's a company that's swapping to insects now, or adding that on top of what they're doing, who are doing quite well in the UK. And what they're seeing is feedstocks that were going into biogas are now getting a harder time because of all of this kind of landfill bans coming up and all of the food waste coming from households that's expected to go up, and at least in the UK, the sense that there's several million tons of more material that they're going to get paid a lot better from, because the councils just simply are not allowed to send it to landfill anymore, so they have to get rid of it. That they're starting to gear themselves up to deal with the municipals and are less interested in some of the kind of less calorific, sort of water heavy stuff like fruit and veg. And so there's some dynamics that are changing, but the people that I speak to in AD are kind of expecting, which is good for them, downward pressure on feedstock pricing in the short to medium term, which bodes well for anyone using feedstock, I guess. But when you combine it with what me and Thomas are saying around the ESG angle, I think it's a welcome time to bring in another tool in the belt. Yeah.
And Larry, I think this is the first question was about regulations, and obviously you're all hinting that there are lots of regulations around waste and waste management and the processing of waste and the classification, which is another factor in the minefield that we grapple with. And again, I'd refer to that report that was in one of the slides. It was a very comprehensive review of the landscape, and say the industry is keen to get government to relax the regulations, and hopefully we're getting some progress on that. There's a question also. Do add further questions if you have other points you want to make about kind of your company's strategies. Flybox, why are you not just farming? Why are you offering farming services? I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I mean, I definitely can't talk for Entercycle, but in terms of what motivates us, the industry right now is dominated by large technology providers. So what we call full farm service providers that want you to do the whole farm. They're mainly European based. And the sense is certainly some of the larger ones, like, I won't mention names, but some of the larger ones they came at this space trying to, they have lots of equipment to resell that they make a good margin from in the other agri industries. And the sense is that this is a new vertical for them that's quite interesting. And big engineering companies come in and kind of scoop up a lot of that. They make their margin day one, and then leave the risk to the operator. And so for us, it's like imperative that the cost of the capital for insect farming, the capex goes down. So our whole approach to this is sourcing in Asia. That has not been done effectively yet. There's lots of troubles that happen when you're trying to source a new equipment set for a new industry from Asia. So going through those miles, taking that on as our burden, then means that people that want to be operators, if we want the industry to succeed, we've got to have people that are making this simpler. And one of the key areas is cutting the price of the capex by 50%. So our R&D team wakes up every day and they go, what are they building in Europe? How do we build it for the same for 50% less by doing the right sourcing and procurement and going through all the necessary hoops to do that? So that's why we focus on it, because we don't think the industry can scale unless you cut that, you improve the genetics, which is obviously what Better Bugs is doing. So there's a number of, and then the feedstock, and we push on the regulations for feedstock. So the whole industry knows kind of the next steps that we need to take, and I guess we're just tackling the one problem. And finally, I'll say we do actually farm insects, so we are actually selling what we produce because we have to. So our site in Chesham, for instance, will do 4 tons a day of feedstock, because the only way to build great tech is to run it day in, day out, and fix problems as they arise so that customers don't. So it is one of those things where it's just we're not advertising that we are, because we don't want to be competing with our customers for making stuff, but we do make it and sell what we produce, because we wouldn't throw it away, and it helps us walk the path before our customers do. So that answers. Yeah.
And obviously Thomas farms because he's producing the eggs. So what we're seeing is a more diversified kind of landscape of models where your mainstream agricultural entity, whether it's a farm or whatever, can get involved through some part of the process, and potentially sort of hub and spoke models, connections through to the waste management. There's lots of ways of playing a role in what is a growing community of people in this area. And Mike, do you want to comment, because you're farmers and you're looking to expand?
Yeah, I think that the in essence the distributed model that Larry's talking about there, where we've got farm diversification and people doing the farming aspect and using tech, I think it's the right way forward. I think it's the only way that the industry is going to scale. I think the days of massive insect farms, huge capital expenditure I don't think that's the right way forward, certainly for the UK. The interest we've had in Australia and the States is definitely on a distributed model, using local substrates, using local food, producing products that can be done semi-autonomously, and using those products locally as well. And I think that's the only way that the industry will scale worldwide successfully.
Thank you. And I'm just going to end on a kind of further plug. I think we are excited to see this community emerging, and different players at different scales exploring insect farming, retailers taking an interest, product companies. there's so much going on. It's very much a moving feast, but as has been acknowledged, the regulations are certainly not helping, and we hope that that's something that we can influence and change. But we at the UKIA are building that kind of community of people who can learn together and find common and kindred spirits, whether you're very small scale farming mealworms just to feed your own poultry, or whether you want to have an ambition to build a very much larger and more modular approach, as Larry described, with a series of containers. You'll find others who are in the same sort of space. And we're also very actively stimulating research. Again, and all our panelists have talked about the research that's going into this, and that is bringing in both new insights and new models, but also helping to reassure government to show the safety of the product and the nutritional value and the consumer acceptance. So the world is changing, and it's a great time to jump on board. And I hope that you'd have an interest in this. And if you want to sign up to our newsletter, you feel free to do that. Obviously, follow the companies that are referred to here. And if you'd like to join UKIA, then let's have a chat. Would anyone else like to make any final remarks?
Yeah, I think just one comment along the lines that the UK insect industry has become significantly more sophisticated. The uses for different products has grown wonderfully over the last couple of years, and I think that as we become more sophisticated and people understand more about insects and their uses, their potential uses, I think we should see more and more diversification, more and more use of insects and the byproducts across the board. I don't see that there's a limit to it.
Thank you. And my final comment, I guess, is compared with the US, where we're seeing the insect farming sectors kind of standing against or a lot of the alternative protein sector standing against mainstream agriculture. I think the message from today is that we want to work with those in the food sector and make this a kind of complementary component that adds value to your diversification, adds value to what you can offer your customers, and hopefully improves the plant at the same time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Could I leave with one final point? Sorry. Which would be that what we haven't covered here, but is available from anyone I'm sure you follow up with if you do, is the financial side of things. So these things highly kind of depend, but there's enough known about it, and one can evaluate whether to do insect farming or whether insect farming is right for your particular company, arbitrage, feedstock, whatever, on paper extremely thoroughly before ever taking any decision to hand over any money to anyone. So I would just say people that are interested in it for the kind of behind a strategy or whatever, there's a lot of resources now, including us, including other online schools and things for insect farming, where they go really drill deep into the economics and the risks and the rewards of doing this. So yeah, it's pretty detailed now, where you need to generate some data in terms of what you're planning to do, feed it into a business plan template, and then really assess it thoroughly for risk. But those are available. If you want to follow up with anyone here, I'm sure we can guide you or send you some examples so you kind of have an idea. But yeah.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Hope you found
Thank
that
you,
helpful. Look forward to
Thank
hearing
you.
from you.
Thanks all.
Cheers.
Right.